Love him or hate him, Donald Trump has a list of accomplishments that put him ahead of other presidents. You see, some presidents make promises, and some keep them. But what happens when a president shakes things up and does what others said was impossible? In this video, we discuss why Trump stands out among US presidents, focusing on where Trump succeeded and where other presidents couldn't. Stick around because by the end of the video, you would get to understand how Trump cracked the American algorithm and how he has been actively using it to gain massive followers. You see, Trump is a $6.7 billion net worth superstar who went from building the tallest towers to becoming the president of the United States. But what people don't know is that for him to be able to do this, he needed to crack the American algorithm. Now you might be wondering, how did a businessman with no political experience end up as president? And how does he stand out among other presidents? Well, Trump, like other great men, doesn't just think like everyone, but thinks like the top 1% of the world. For him to be able to reach where he is today, he needed to crack the American algorithm. He needed to have a business mindset, and you see, he started off just from the right set, taking a legacy from a father who was a billionaire to owning his own hotels and bars. But here is what is interesting. His accomplishments during his term as president is what made him stand out. Not just that, but the strategies and methods he used to do this. Let's kickstart with how he launched his campaign in 2016. And trust me, people didn't know what to think at first. But one thing was clear. He was speaking his mind and getting the attention of the nation. People loved his bold ideas and his promise to make America great again. This really hit millions of Americans. But what got many Americans was how, despite no prior political experience, Trump shocked the world by winning the presidency. The man who had never been in politics was now running the show in the White House. And everything that made him stand out against other presidents lies down to these facts. You see, if we compare Trump with other presidents in the aspect of jobs, going back into the late 1970s when President Jimmy Carter had a tough time with the economy, the country at this time was facing something called stagflation, which was just a fancy way of saying everything was bad. Prices were up, but jobs were down, and millions of Americans were left without work. It wasn't because Carter didn't care. The simple truth was that he just couldn't figure out how to turn things around. But now here's where Trump stood out. During his time, he didn't sit back and let the economy run on autopilot. He cut taxes for businesses, he rolled back regulations, and he also went ahead and told companies that if they wanted to grow their businesses, they should do it right here in America. And guess what? What he did completely shaped the America we see today. Companies and factories listened to him, and small businesses thrived. People who had been searching for work for months or even years finally got their chance. In just 3 years as president, Trump added over 6 million jobs to the US economy, and that was a game changer. Still yet, while Trump was on the road of creating jobs in America, he needed to cut taxes. And how he did this left many Americans amazed and drove most results. You see, if we go back to the 1990s with President Bill Clinton, Clinton raised taxes especially for high earners, which in return gave a big gap between the rich and the poor. Some critics argued it helped the budget. But to be real, a lot of folks weren't happy. Many businesses felt squeezed, and middle-class families often wondered why their paychecks felt a little lighter. Talking of taxes, nobody likes them, but everyone has to deal with them. Trump shook things up when he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So he believed that when people kept more of their hard-earned cash, they either spent it, invested it, or fueled the economy, which sounded impossible at the beginning. But surprisingly, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act worked. Families could finally afford that summer vacation, and small businesses, which were the backbone of America, started thriving. But then some critics still talked about the rate of unemployment in America. Trump, having a business mindset, approached this in a way that completely changed the unemployment graph. You see, in a period of 50 years, the lowest unemployment rate stood at a staggering 3.5%, which was under Trump's leadership. But how he did this is the question many asked. If we compare him to Barack Obama's first term, which was in the year 2009, the unemployment rate had climbed to a staggering 10%. This was really a tough time because millions of Americans were out of work, and many felt hopeless. Sure, the Great Recession played a huge part in this, and Obama worked hard to stabilize things. But for a lot of people, recovery felt slow, and opportunities seemed just out of reach. On the other hand, Trump's approach was different. He believed in cutting the red tape, supporting businesses, and creating an environment where companies could grow and hire. In the end, the results spoke for themselves. Americans didn't just see the change, they felt it as their futures were shaped. So, while Obama had to wrestle with tough times and high unemployment, Trump's policies led to record-breaking job numbers. Another act that makes Trump stand out that left many Americans congratulating him was how he made NATO to pay up. You see, he isn't just a guru at what he does, but he was able to do this just because he had cracked the American algorithm. He knew what he was doing and he proved himself. First of all, let's look back and compare him to Harry S. Truman's time. Harry S. Truman is the president who helped found NATO in 1949, and his vision during this time was to create a collective defense system to counter the growing threat of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But despite his efforts, NATO struggled to get member countries to fully contribute to the defense costs. But while Truman laid the foundation for NATO's existence, he didn't have the same leverage or willingness to challenge allies as Trump did. NATO's spending was often at a point of tension, and many allies were hesitant to meet the financial targets that Truman envisioned. On the other hand, Trump's approach to NATO marked a turning point in the alliance's history. For many years, the United States shouldered much of the financial burden, spending billions on defense while NATO allies contributed less than their fair share. When Trump took office, he made it clear that the U.S. wasn't going to continue footing the bill alone. He strongly pressured NATO members to meet their defense spending commitments of 2% of their GDP, something many countries had been falling short on for decades, and Trump's direct and often blunt approach got results. By the time he left office, NATO allies had committed billions more to defense, with countries like Germany and Canada stepping up their contributions. Trump's tough stance on NATO made it clear that the alliance had to share the responsibility more equally. His leadership forced NATO to confront its financial imbalances, and the results were undeniable. While Truman helped establish NATO and laid the groundwork for collective defense, it was Trump who ensured that NATO members paid their fair share, making the alliance stronger and more financially sustainable. Another interesting point that makes Trump stand out is how, despite no political war experience before, he was able to stand up to China, which drove many to ask questions on how he did this. Now, we will ask the question, why and how did Trump have to stand up to China in the first place? You see, during President Clinton's presidency, the U.S. signed a trade deal with China that paved the way for China's entry into the World Trade Organization, and at the time, it seemed like a good move for global trade. But in hindsight, it had serious consequences. American factories began closing down as jobs shifted to China, where labor was cheaper. And while Clinton hoped this agreement would lead to more open markets, it ultimately allowed China to flood the U.S. market with cheaper goods, undermining American manufacturing and causing a significant loss of jobs in industries that once thrived. On the other hand, Trump's approach to China was a game changer. He started by imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, and by doing this, he sent a powerful message that the United States wasn't going to back down when it came to unfair trade practices. These tariffs were designed to level the playing field and ensure that China respected American businesses and workers. And under Trump, the U.S. took a firm stance, demanding China to play fair, especially when it came to issues like intellectual property theft and unfair market practices. In this way, Trump's policies on China stood in stark contrast to Clinton's. Now moving on, let's talk about the historic peace agreements. Some people might be wondering, what did Trump do that made him stand out in this point? But you see, he was able to initiate peace agreements between Israel and several Arab nations. Now, if we go back to 2020, when Trump played a crucial role in brokering the Abraham Accords, where there was a peace deal between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and later Sudan and Morocco. This was groundbreaking, as it marked the first time in decades that Arab nations and Israel normalized relations, opening doors for trade, cooperation, and a more peaceful Middle East. On the other hand, if we compare him to Lyndon B. Johnson, Johnson's presidency was overshadowed by the Vietnam War. Meanwhile, in the beginning, Johnson entered office with high hopes for creating a great society in the U.S., but his focus quickly shifted to the escalating conflict in Vietnam, and despite efforts to contain communism, Johnson became deeply attached in a war that divided the nation and ultimately led to heavy casualties with widespread protests and no clear resolution. In the end, peace in Vietnam seemed above him to restore, making Trump stand out because, while Johnson's presidency struggled to bring peace, particularly in Southeast Asia, Trump was able to achieve something many thought could never happen in the Middle East. Moving on, we talk about how Trump secured the border wall better. This particular issue has sparked debate to many, but how he did it is what catches many people's attention, and also one of the reasons he stands out. When you compare Trump's success to George W. Bush's attempts, it's clear that Trump's approach was far more aggressive and effective than Bush's. You see, Bush made efforts to secure the border, But while his administration made some improvements to border security and started building portions of a fence, the project was hindered by budget limitations and a lack of comprehensive political support. And with this at hand, Bush couldn't secure enough funding to finish the border wall, leaving the project unfinished and lacking the same level of focus that Trump brought to it. Trump's push for a border wall was central to his presidency, and he worked tirelessly to secure the funding needed to make it a reality, despite facing strong opposition. You see, his focus on building a border wall was one of his signature promises during his campaign in 2016, and he made sure to follow through. During his leadership, over 450 miles of new and replacement border barriers were constructed along the U.S.-Mexico border. Trump's administration prioritized security and took strong action to stop illegal immigration, and with the border wall being a cornerstone of that effort. The project not only aimed to stop illegal crossings, but also to reduce drug trafficking and human smuggling. For Trump, the border wall wasn't just about physical barriers. It was about sending a clear message that illegal immigration would no longer be tolerated. Then came the COVID-19, which at the time, many Americans were filled with fear. But how Trump handled this is one of the reasons that he stands out among other presidents. Let's take a step back to the 1918 flu pandemic, when President Woodrow Wilson's response was slower and less focused on vaccine development. Back then, the world didn't have the advanced technology or resources we have today. But even with the technology of the time, Wilson didn't prioritize developing a flu vaccine. The focus was more on containment measures and other public health strategies. But the rapid production of a vaccine wasn't even on the horizon, and in the end, the flu pandemic led to millions of deaths worldwide, with no immediate solution to the problem. You see, Trump's Operation Warp Speed was nothing short of a game-changer in the fight against COVID-19, which was launched in 2020. This initiative was a massive partnership between the federal government, private companies, and the military to accelerate the development, production, and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. By December of the same year, vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna were already being rolled out to millions of Americans less than a year after the virus was first identified. The speed at which these vaccines were developed and distributed was unprecedented, saving countless lives and helping bring the pandemic under control. So, while Wilson was limited by the era's medical capabilities during the 1918 pandemic, Trump's leadership and the collaboration of public and private sectors during the COVID-19 demonstrated how fast action and modern technology can save lives. The next on our list that makes Trump stand out is how he destroyed ISIS. The method he used here was one of the best, but yet the most effective method that drove positive results. You see, Trump's approach to fighting ISIS was nothing short of decisive. When he took office, ISIS was a massive threat, controlling vast amounts of territory in Syria and Iraq, and carrying out horrific attacks around the world. But under Trump's leadership, the U.S. military launched relentless strikes, targeting ISIS strongholds and wiping out their leadership. The most notable victory was the takedown of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was cornered in a daring raid by U.S. Navy SEALs in 2019. This was a huge moment, showing that Trump was serious about wiping out the terror group once and for all. Comparing to George W. Bush's war on terror, while Bush's administration focused heavily on eliminating terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda after 9/11, it unintentionally created conditions that helped ISIS rise to power. The invasion of Iraq destabilized the region, leading to chaos and the emergence of extremist groups like ISIS. Despite Bush's efforts, ISIS grew stronger in the years that followed, spreading terror across the Middle East. But Trump's no-nonsense strategy of using military force, intelligence, and international cooperation put ISIS on the back foot. Trump showed that when it comes to fighting terrorism, you need strength, precision, and unwavering commitment. Now, at the beginning of the video, we mentioned Trump breaking the American algorithm. But what is this American algorithm? You see, the world is made up of a top 1% of people who break rules, make the rules, and have understood the system. Some even go ahead to run the system. But what Trump knows is what is keeping him at the front line. You see, the American algorithm sounds fancy, but it's actually pretty simple. The algorithm is like the code that controls what gets attention in America. Donald Trump is always at the center of attention, and he is able to this because of the three-part viral formula strategy in his algorithm. The first part of this viral formula shows controversy equals attention. You see, Trump knows how the internet works. The more controversial you are, the more people share your name. Whether people love him or hate him, they can't stop talking about him. And to see how this has made him stand out, let's take a step back to Herbert Hoover's time in office. When he was president, the stock market wasn't breaking records, but rather it was breaking spirits. The crash of 1929 was devastating, wiping out life savings and leading to the Great Depression. Hoover's policies couldn't stop the economic freefall, and millions of Americans were left jobless and hopeless. On the other hand, when Donald Trump took office, he promised to supercharge the economy, and what was delivered shocked everyone. During his presidency, it seemed like every week brought a new record. Trump's time in office was the opposite to Hoover's. He created an environment where businesses thrived and markets soared. Sure, there were challenges like trade wars and a pandemic, but over 100 times the market hit historic highs. It wasn't just about numbers going up, it was about confidence. Investors believed in Trump's vision of tax cuts, deregulation, and a business-friendly America. And with this, millions of everyday Americans saw their retirement accounts grow, and it wasn't just Wall Street celebrating, but Main Street celebrating too. The second part of his viral formula is he turns politics into entertainment. You see, Trump doesn't act like a regular politician. He acts like a reality TV star. He knows how to create drama and how to keep the audience hooked, and this has made him gain many followers. You see, when it came to veteran care, Trump was hailed as the guru. He turned things up and shaped how veteran care took place in America. If we look at Barack Obama's time in office, where the country was rocked by reports of veterans being forced to wait months and sometimes even years to receive medical care. Some VA hospitals were even accused of manipulating waiting lists, causing unnecessary delays that left veterans in desperate need of care. Obama's administration tried to address these issues, but despite their best efforts, the system remained burdened and inefficient, and the veterans who had fought for their country were left feeling neglected. Trump, on the other hand, made sure that veterans, the brave men and women who served their country, didn't have to wait months for care. One of his significant accomplishments in office was expanding and improving access to healthcare for veterans through the VA Mission Act, which allowed veterans to seek private healthcare if they couldn't get timely care through the VA system. His administration understood the importance of giving veterans access to quality healthcare when they needed it, and the changes made a real difference in the lives of many, unlike Obama's administration, which struggled with managing the VA system. And while Trump was caring for the veterans, it came to his understanding that during the time of John F. Kennedy, the president who inspired the world by setting the goal of landing the first man on the moon, his vision for space exploration was remarkable and helped America in putting a man on the moon in 1969. But Trump, seeing this, decided to make history by creating the Space Force, which became the first military branch in over 70 years. This wasn't just a bold move, but a crucial step in securing America's place as a leader in space. The Space Force aimed to protect the United States' interests in space, making sure that no one could disrupt satellite communications, defend against space-based threats, or even interfere with global positioning systems. So you see, while Kennedy inspired a nation to reach for the stars, Trump stood out as he made sure that America would always have the means to defend them. The last part of how Trump cracks the American algorithm is he masters the us versus them game. You see, Trump has a simple trick. He always creates an enemy, the media, the government, or even other politicians. This makes his supporters feel like they're in a fight, and when people feel like they're part of something big, they stay loyal. This has been actively making Trump stand out, and one of the aspects include Trump helping black colleges. You see, if we compare him to Obama's presidency, Obama supported black colleges, but critics say his funding and resources did not come close to what Trump achieved. Meanwhile, Trump in 2017 signed a historic executive order that brought attention and significant funding to black colleges, and by securing over $250 million in funding, Trump demonstrated a strong commitment to empowering black colleges. Still yet, when you look at how Trump stands out, you might think he is not hated by Americans. Meanwhile, he is rated as one of the top most hated American presidents. The video next exposes why Trump is among America's 12 most hated presidents. Stay tuned.